Besides Killzone Shadowfall and the top-down game on the PSP, I actually never really took the time to properly play a Killzone game before. So I figured why not make a nostalgia-free video where I played through the entire game for the very first time to see how it holds up today, while at the same time putting myself in the seat of what it was like playing this game for the first time all those years ago without having rose-tinted glasses on. Before we get started, you need to know that I was playing this game on an emulator, so the graphics you will see here are of higher resolution than on a PS2. The game is also quite challenging, which is something I'll talk more about later. And as I wasn't really interested in improving my skills, but more so to play the game as an experience, I did use some game shortcodes to help me progress the game a little bit faster. Looking back, it seems that the expectations were incredibly high, as the game was hyped up to be a Halo killer. Killzone is a mission-based first-person shooter that has you play through various missions spawning across several campaigns. Early in the campaign, you will unlock new playable characters as you progress, where each of them have a different playstyle. John, who is an all-round fighter, Luger, who has a deadly knife, Rico, the heavy weapons guy, and Haka, who is another deadly knife character. The difference isn't that massive between the characters, except for a few weapons that they can carry. One of the highlights of the game is the first-person animations, where reloads look pretty realistic and have a heavy feeling of weight. The details of the reloads are quite impressive for a game from 2004. Other possibly groundbreaking animations for its time are fully animated object vaulting, animated ladder climbing, and animated entry animations for mounted weapons. I think DICE, the developer of Battlefield 3, must have been inspired by this game when it comes to how the animation can be blended with interactive gameplay. The level consists of different styles of layout. Most often you will face levels that aren't too unfamiliar to what you would see in a Call of Duty game, where you go from point A to point B and do an objective or two in between. All the standard stuff is in there, such as destroying a tank, arming a bomb to blow up a door, or saving some soldiers. At times though, the levels can be quite large, where you can find yourself trying to find your way forward, which reminds me a little bit of Crysis 2 in the park areas. Unfortunately, the levels tend to copy their assets a bit too heavily, so it can be quite confusing, as it will feel like you have run past the same corridors and areas a few times already. On top of that, the checkpoint system, while welcome, is quite rarely utilized, so if you die, the game can set back your progress 50 minutes or more if you're unlucky. The confusing levels aren't helped by the incredibly depressing art direction, which is focused on making an appearance of the bleakest possible future you can think of. Most of the colors are basically grey, yellow, or shades in between. While it was likely a cool and unique choice back in the day, I think by today's standards it really hurts the game, as overall it decreases the visibility and it's also tiring to watch for longer durations. When it comes to the combat, the AI all pretty much behave in the same way, as in they will try to run up to you with their guns blazing. Not only does this create a very repetitive combat scenario, but it also makes it very difficult when there are 5 to 6 soldiers all running towards you. The frustration is even further elevated by somewhat undetailed directional damage markers, and that the enemy voice audio all seems to be played at the same volume, regardless of distance, with no proper stereo positioning. You really have to be on your toes to survive most of the time. Looking at the player combat loop, there are also several problems, such as enemies simply being able to take too much damage before going down. And with the weapons having quite long reload times, the battles can become quite bland. Almost all weapons also come with an alternative fire, but instead of being a powerful alternative like in most other games, it's quite often much weaker than the main firing mode. Also, if you're in the middle of one of the long reload animations, you're actually not able to break the animation to fire the alternative weapon, which actually is the most common situation where you would want to use it. It's likely that it wasn't possible to solve this due to limitations in the animation technology back in the day, but regardless, this is something that frustrated me throughout the entire game. The grenades in the game are cookable, which is nice though, but unfortunately the throw is incredibly slow, which makes it quite an ineffective weapon. The game's framerate also gets in the way of the aiming, as it's very easy to over-aim, as the game has no aim assist or snapping at all. Overall, due to all of these issues, and the game also at times being very stingy with ammo, it feels like they really want you to approach the game slowly, as close combat has so many punishing aspects. However, at long distance, the game also has several issues, such as weapons having quite a bit of spread, and enemies being bullet sponges, which means that you will be emptying quite a lot of max for only a few kills. The sniper rifle in the game also has a unique control scheme in the sense that when you use the scope, you can't really move around, but rather you have to hold down the right analog stick off its center to move the crosshair, and to move the camera you have to aim at the edges of the screen. It almost feels like this was inspired by a game like Silent Scope or something, because it just doesn't work due to the controller's sensitivity, making the sniping very slow and imprecise. There is a clash of design that is holding the game back here, as both close combat and long-range combat equally don't really fit well into how the AI behaves and how the weapons are designed.
Executed fucking Hellgas style.
Jesus.
The story of the game is a bit hard to follow, as you're simply thrown into a conflict with little plot or character development. Basically, it's set 400 years in the future where a bloody war is ongoing between different factions. The guy you mostly play is some kind of elite soldier, and overall it feels like they were aiming to do something like a gun-focused Star Wars universe.
Oh shit! Hellgas!
Some of the cutscenes feel inspired by Star Wars and even the music in them, while others seem to be trying to mimic the style of the macho action movies like The Predator, where there's quite a lot of rough banter and funny conversations between the team members. Overall, the story is mildly entertaining and the cutscenes have a nice length between missions, but it's not something you'll remember much of a few days later after playing the game. Now, you might think that I didn't like the game, but actually I thought it was quite alright, and the game is visually impressive even to this day. Especially the weapon reload animation is something that's acceptable even by today's standards. There's even small touches in the game that even by today's technology is very difficult to do, like for example soldiers rappelling out from a helicopter from ropes. My main issue with the game, however, is how it's paced and how often the cool moments happen, which honestly isn't very often, as most of the time you'll either be spending fighting a very high number of the same enemies over and over again, with each battle playing out almost exactly the same way due to the lack of the varied AI behavior, or you'll simply be trying to find a switch to unlock the next section, which is quite frustrating due to the lack of direction and repetitive environmental art, which often will have you running in circles. In my ending words, I want to say that Killzone has a lot of strong pieces that just don't fit well together, with a pacing that has a lot of lows and very few peaks. I think Killzone is a great game to look back at to see where a lot of modern elements came from. While obviously very flawed, I think that this game deserves a lot of respect for what it tried to do. So I'm giving this game a 6 out of 10.